Hello. Hello to the people of the future who are not here. I hear my baby yelling and my amazing wife. So if you want to chat, hop on in. That's what this is for. The topic on my mind recently is, the topic on my mind most recently is honesty and trustworthiness. Those have been topics that have been on my mind. So, but also I can just host this. Other people can chat if you want to. I can be here for about 2 hours, maybe. Here's an interesting phrase. Just time box it. And if you can't figure it out, I can help. I can try to help. Time box it. Would be nice to have some music in the background when nobody's chatting. I know there is music that you can buy, um, and then you get the rights to use it. You pay like maybe $100 for a song or something, or a collection of songs. Let's see. Mitch. I think I saw Mitch in the Bible study. Personal honesty and trustworthiness, or more generally. So I think it's both. I think those are connected. Um, Now, it might depend on what you mean by personal honesty and trustworthiness. Like, um, how much do you trust yourself, and how honest are you with yourself? Like, that's what I'm thinking when you ask personal honesty and trustworthiness. But like, there's people behave in ways which cause them to earn trust or to lose trust, right? And it, to me, it's connected to honesty. And so, for example, someone will say they will meet you at a certain time. They'll meet you at a certain place and a certain time, and say they get there 2 hours late. Okay, that's some kind of heuristic. But what if they do that 10 times in a row? So then obviously we can't trust that person to meet you when they say they're going to meet you. But does it also tell you about something about their character? You know, how honest are they in general? Um, and so similarly, like, as an individual, do you say you will do something and then you don't do it? Um, that's and would it be good to be a person who does the things they say they are going to do? So the trustworthiness and the honesty, right? It's a big topic, but perhaps there are some simple indicators, right? So like, uh, do you want your politicians to be people who will do what they say they are going to do? And so could you track all the things they say they're going to do, including I'll see you there at a certain time, right? And that would indicate how trustworthy and honest they are. These would be very simple data points to collect. Oh man, let's see. I don't like this person. Block user. Interesting. Another one, an attack. Block user. I wonder if these are going through. There was some people trying to advertise for. I think they probably are trying to advertise pornography. I don't know if it made it through into the live stream. Let's see. Mitch says, some people probably they may just listen to these. So Mitch Caps says, it made me think of how to test and source truth claims, especially when various sources seem equally trustworthy by some of the simple measure you laid out, and even into more complex ones. Yeah, I think there's an inner Jacob in my head who would say something like, just because someone is always late and they don't show up on time, uh, doesn't mean they can't be trusted with a specific thing, which would be true. But it also seems important to be able to recognize people who try to be trustworthy and honest about everything. So if you had to pick between, two people who are equally trustworthy about one field, it would be nice to be able to identify people who are trustworthy across everything. But trustworthy to do what? Right? There's probably some goal. So you're talking about how to test and source truth claims. Let me kick this pull request real quick. I added a try-catch block based on peer review. And now the CI/CD pipeline is going to do its thing. So someone can say something that is true, but they could also be someone who shows up late to meetings. Reminded of that Einstein story of he's on a train and he's on the ground. And I guess there's someone walking down the aisle asking for tickets. And Einstein's looking for his ticket. And I guess maybe this is the conductor. The conductor says, "Oh, you don't need your ticket. I know who you are. I trust you." And Einstein keeps looking for the ticket, and the conductor says it again. Says, I told you you don't need your ticket." And Einstein says, "No, I need the ticket because I don't know where I'm going." Right? So it could be that some people, people have strengths and weaknesses. So because someone can get so focused on one thing, they can ignore other things. Right? So then showing up on time could be a weakness, but corresponding with that could be a strength. So you might trust them in their strong area, and you would not trust them in their weak area. But if you're honest, you would be honest about your weak areas as well. But yeah, I think the underlying topic, especially like on Jacob's Discord server, would be distributed cognition. Another phrase is sense making. And then another idea is competence hierarchies. So these all seem related to me. One problem I run into is I can recognize someone's weakness and their strength. Maybe they correspond, but if I say it out loud and honestly, it can be perceived as criticism because people might not want to be honest with themselves about their own weaknesses. And I saw an interesting article. I shared it in Jacob's Ladder Discord server and the Torah channel from Chabad. And let's see, copy link. So that got me thinking about truth. The article says, telling the truth and when it is permissible to be less than honest. And then they have the author, and I say they, we have to be careful with our language. The author, there was a specific author. Maybe the author had reviewers and editors, and it's on a website, right? So who are they? Who wrote this? Whose ideas? Who owns these ideas and accepts them? So you can change the truth in order to practice humility. Well, and then they say, for example, one may claim ignorance of a certain Talmudic tractate, even if one does actually know it. And so maybe this is the right way to be in a certain context, but wouldn't it be good if the sense-making organization, like an organization that was concerned about learning and teaching, cared if about who knew what and did not know what? And so it's like, how can you have a competence hierarchy when people who are competent are being deceptive about what they do and do not know? Right. So there's a trade-off, there's a cost. So even in this example, humility could be put up on a hierarchy of values above truth. And there's a trade-off and their cost, and that would be competence hierarchy. Like you're sacrificing the possibility of an ideal competence hierarchy. That's what comes to mind. You're sacrificing the ideal competence hierarchy, which is able to do sense making. So that was the first example. The second example, changing the truth in order to maintain modesty. Yeah, there's always a trade-off when you deceive. And it's always the sacrifice, the thing you're sacrificing when you do a deception, intentionally deceive, you're sacrificing something about the capacity for sense making and competence hierarchy. Obviously, this seems like it should be context dependent, but I don't know if we have any organizations in the world that can be trusted. And it's because every organization in the world is doing deception because something is higher in the hierarchy of values than truth. Right? So modesty in some situations can be higher than truth. Humility in some situations can be higher than truth. But like if you were part of an organization whose core responsibility is like education, for our species, for example, or for any organization, it's like when you start, you would trust would be lost. Like people will not be able to trust you if you're putting other things above truth. So it seems like, is there an organization in the world that puts truth above humility, above modesty? It's Hezi just mentioned AI becoming God, and like in the Aubrey Marcus conversation with Pajot. And Pajot, I would say neither of them are great at considering that the AI could become God. Like, like you can come up with an infinite number of stories to explain this reality, and you probably need to be a person who has read a lot of science fiction in order to imagine how an AI could become God. So it's most people on the internet and in this little corner just can't even imagine. It's just impossible for most people in this little corner to imagine how an AI could become God. So, for example, Jonathan Pajot is like, the AI is in some kind of an amalgamation, a collection of human intelligence, which is scary. And it's like, yeah, it's scary, but then what do you do because of that? Well, it's similar to what I'm talking about here. It's like, if you could identify, so you can use an AI, for example, to identify people who are honest and trustworthy, and then use those people as the way to train your artificial intelligence, right? So those are two really big ideas about how to use artificial intelligence, which did not get considered because Aubrey Marcus isn't me and Jonathan Pajot isn't me, right? I'm swimming in this stuff, right? And this would, yeah, you could probably. It seems like a Mark Lefevre should have a video on. Oh, he's gonna. I can point at his navigating patterns. Does navigating patterns have anything about artificial intelligence from the person who is an expert? Right, his expertise is in information technology, and I disagree with some of the things he said, which doesn't mean I disagree with what he thinks. I disagree with my interpretation of the words he said, right? He speaks quickly. And the things he says can be true within a context. I kept trying to point that out. But does Mark Lefevre have anything on artificial intelligence? Navigating patterns. Like, how many people in this little corner are qualified to talk about this? And among those, how many people are actually talking about it? But they're connected. This honesty, trustworthiness thing connected with you should call them machine learning models, right? Where you train models to accomplish goals, and you could train these models to get better at identifying honest and trustworthy human beings. And then you could train a different model to parse through all of the information that these honest and trustworthy human beings are creating in order to create a oracle, for example. Obviously, I've read a whole bunch of science fiction. I've been revisiting some of the science fiction that I have read previously. Right now, I'm doing The Way of Kings, Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archives, because I think I want to read the latest in that series, but I wanted to go back through the previous ones. And I've also been reading this, Fruit Trees for Every Garden. So I've got a project that's going to be like a 5-year project. And so I want to grow my own pear. Get it? Grow a pear? Growapear.com. All right. Navigating patterns. Machine learning. YouTube. Yeah, I don't know if he has anything. So, like even Mark, there's a question. How trustworthy is Gavin? Me. How trustworthy is Mark? And so, like, how trustworthy is Paul Vanderklay, right? So I created a spreadsheet and I reached out to a bunch of people in this little corner and I asked for their name, their contact, their corner goal 1 through corner goal 7, right? And then there's a question. It's like, what happens if you aren't being explicit in your corner goals, right? Because, like, being goal oriented is necessary in order to be productive and to communicate and signal to other people how they might be able to help. And if you, and so here I am listening to Paul Vanderklay and Hezi. And so this thing that Paul does, it's it's like a fun thing. I have a dream with Paul and Pajot, and they like to have fun. That's what they're doing on the internet, is they are having fun. Try to get them to be explicit about their goals. So Paul is using his YouTube channel to think out loud, and those goals can change. Maybe they are changing. I would say what he's doing, whether he hasn't stated it explicitly or not, is these conversations. Probably the most important thing that he is doing on the internet is these conversations. So I'm going to listen to some more PVK, unless you want to chat. PVK just said, God has clearly not abandoned his chosen people. What's he doing? And Hezy's about to respond. But there's and I'm interested in what he's going to say, but I think that many people wrongly believe that God is omnipotent. And then what does omnipotent mean? And so there's the risk of believing God is omnipotent is to believe that the entire world is going as planned, right? That that whatever is good. And so if that's not the case, so if like I can accept that God is omniscient and we can have a relationship with God, and God is omnipresent everywhere. Those I can accept, but I don't accept that God is responsible for everything that happens, right? And I believe that humans have a capacity to do good work through our own participation in the world. And so, yeah, the idea that a lot of people, like even PVK there, the idea that, it is the way it is because God wants it to be that way, is it's a belief I do not accept. And it's a dangerous belief because it undermines our own capacity to do good work. So let's hear what Hezi has to say. And I'm not playing it here, so you can check it out. Or you can hop in the chat. You can participate. Actually, my prioritizations, it's good to actually identify them and be explicit. There's Roman. But yeah, like top, just to be explicit, I've got it's nice to remember God. Then, my wife and children, and which is nice that I'm actually working from home. And then I've got this responsibility at work. And so if things start breaking at work, I'm responsible. and then I'm trying to help and be helpful at work. And, I like to put in at least about 8 hours a day, at least, of work. And then there's this, right? And then the chat here, if you want to hop in the chat, you get more priority than PVK and Hezi, right? But Roman. And the metaphor of God as universal sysadmin, it seems like it's a bit of both. It's a free will question, right? And so Pharaoh had his heart hardened according to the Bible, if you believe it is true. But I don't just believe the Bible is true. I don't believe it's the word of God. But I do know what it feels like to have my heart hardened. But I also think that we can do practices in order to, soften our hearts. And so do we give credit to God for our own ability to soften our hearts? To a degree, right? Because of our parents and our environment and all the people around us, because we as an individual can't take credit for everything. But also I don't think God can take credit for everything as well, right? But maybe a little bit of both. Yeah. Seems about right. But I would say no one can take credit for everything, not even God. That's what it seems. God created it all, but God doesn't do things arbitrarily. The spec is more complicated than what God wants. There are aesthetic and engineering concerns. Now, Roman appreciates the aesthetic more than I do. And I believe like it's important to have diversity, right? Let's see. Free will is one of those aesthetic concerns. Well, I would say that let's see, and y'all are welcome to hop in this thing if you want to and talk to each other as well. But yeah, God is ineffable, right? So I'd say that's a good starting point. So if we start talking about what God and God isn't, that obviously we could be wrong. Well, probably are wrong, and we're wrestling trying to figure it out. But maybe, I don't know, is also a good answer. I get concerned when we get confident about what we know. But let's see, Aaron, credit for what? It's a good question. We can have goals, right? I think it would be good to be explicit in our goals, and then, do we, how do those goals get accomplished, right? So, does God have goals, and can God accomplish those goals without humans, right? And therefore, who gets credit for accomplishing the goal? I think it would require teamwork and cooperation. Like any sufficiently large goal, right? There's no like human or individual that can get credit for accomplishing a sufficiently difficult goal. For example, like climate change. That's Jordan Peterson's point. When you say climate change, you mean everything. Say, yeah. Like if you want to have something that's akin to like the end time revelation with peace on earth, that would be something like climate change, right? It means everything being as good as possible. And it can't be done by just like God, and it can't be done just by an individual. It would require like a large amount of cooperation, like by definition. No one gets credit. Like I said, y'all feel free to hop in this thing and talk. And as a host, I can just sit back and let other people talk. I don't have to talk. I can just ban the advertisers who are trying to sell porn. I did that earlier. Hopefully try not to get anyone's YouTube channel, strikes or blocks or anything like that. That's what I'm doing here. Come on in, Aaron. It'd be good to have like you and Roman or been able to talk about these things as well. I was like thinking about doing a recording on all this stuff I'm interested in, and it's never as good as when I can actually just present thoughts and ideas that can be, you know, rejected or disagreed with. Like I definitely need some kind of a sparring partner when I'm thinking out loud. I can't do it as well as PBK when he's doing his thinking out loud. Roman, I'm a programmer, so when I think about God, I think of a programmer with programming concerns, just like in the Bible. God is sometimes called a potter. So the best user interface is no user interface, right? If you create software that allows for people to accomplish their goals without an interface, that would be nice. But I know you. Obviously, there's a user experience. There's some type of interface and interaction, and those things are important, right? And when I say that, I'm also thinking, like when I say that the best interface is no interface, the better truth would be, it's nice to allow people to use the interface they are familiar with to accomplish their goals instead of forcing them to learn a new interface if doing so is not necessary. But yeah, I mean, I like trying to map reality based on, I mean, that's what we do. We try to map reality based on our experiences. And the model of a programmer is, it can be useful, right? All models are wrong. Some are useful. Some people don't care about the aesthetics as much as the other. Like aesthetic can mean, there's actually, I would recommend lawsofux.com. Like if you're into UX, but yeah, sometimes people care about an aesthetic that doesn't necessarily, it could provide for a better experience for one person and a worse experience for another. Like you could end up with people who are colorblind, for example. Let's see. Jesus calls himself the farmer. Yeah, I think farming is a really good model. Let's see. Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I'm reading. I'm planning on, like, I want to grow a pair, and I say that trying to be funny as well, but I really do want to grow a pair at growapair.com. And so I have this book. I'm about halfway through it, but this is like at least a 5-year project to grow your own pair. And then I have the Fruit Gardener's Bible. And so I'm actually, like, my tradition is a bit shamanic, like plants are sacred. And so, what isn't sacred, but as long as it's not an idol. But yeah, I think there's a lot you can learn in farming, and there are maps, useful maps in farming that map onto many other things about reality. So the aesthetic, you can want an aesthetic that is not good. So it would have to be like, it would need to produce good fruit, right? If it is aesthetically pleasing and it produces good fruit, even better. I personally care about like the fruit, the productivity. But it's interesting. There's smells, and smells are kind of connected with pollinators. So there's an aesthetic in nature that like is different than the aesthetic that you can want in your own mind. it does remind me of pornography. There was those advertisers for pornography. It's like there's an aesthetic in pornography that is can cause like some kind of mental sickness. So you just have to be careful with the aesthetic. It would need to be good and um, good and beautiful, right? It can't just be beautiful. But the link to chat should be at the very top of the chat history. Otherwise, I will be paying attention to other things.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, I'm Gavin. I
How's it
live
going,
in
Gavin?
Alabama,
I live in Texas.
Texas.
Yeah,
Awesome.
the greatest state. Just
The
kidding.
greatest.
The greatest.
All right. I'm not going to get an argument from me. I don't know the greatest state.
The funny thing about, I guess, Texas confidence, they just say it's the greatest, and most people would probably be like, I don't know if it's the greatest. I don't know if mine's the greatest, and they don't like add to the dialogue about that. And so then Texas just could be like, oh yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. I think if you said Alabama was the greatest, I don't. I'd probably be just more of agreeance, like, oh yeah, cool, man.
Well, I went to Colorado for a few months, and I got where I missed the biodiversity of Alabama. Like I've heard, like Alabama is the Amazon of the United States. Like we got so many waterways, and it's there's a lot of life. You know,
Really,
a lot of nature. Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. That's what I missed most. Like when people talk about the greatest state or the greatest country, um, like the natural resources I think have a lot more to play and which is the greatest, more so than, for example, the government. Like
Yeah,
you can, like it's nice if you have an abundance of or can have an abundance of resources where you are. That's really nice actually.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as ecological stuff, where I'm from, it's actually kind of a desert, but I really like it.
Fragmented dude person. I do wonder, people have these profiles and avatars, and I do know like real names. I wonder if I can say people's real names. Like I felt I named Fluffy Ribbit. So, but yeah, I know who this is.
Yeah,
Actually, through being in this little corner of the internet, I've learned like even Gringras. I know his first name now because I've heard people name him a couple times.
they name him. Yeah, I guess they all dox each other eventually.
Well, some people take it more seriously than others, I think, right?
The avoidance of like,
Being anonymous to some degree.
mm,
Yeah.
no, not me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, if you get popular and this is the path to popularity, then you might be more concerned.
that's true. Um, yeah, I mean, I've never been too popular of a person. Uh, but I had a question about the I just woke up, so please forgive me. But the concept of everyone has to change something, not one person or not God. What do you mean by that?
What up? Okay, so I
I think
guess for
not challenging it, just
yeah, yeah. The so when I think about what like peace on earth could be,
yeah,
then there's a you know there's a question like how could you have peace unless there was like a sufficient number of human beings, right? There's some minimum percentage of the human beings that have to be have a certain quality about themselves for there to be peace,
yeah,
right? And
hmm
and perhaps even if we're still having children, we know that children are born, dependent and kind of ignorant to some degree, and that will have to learn and be taught. So we would need to, if there are children in that time, you would definitely need a way of teaching and parenting. So
hmm
we would all need, if any one person like stopped participating, um, like each person could potentially cause um, there to not be peace, right? Like we would all have the power to ruin the peace.
yeah. I think we kind of do. I used to live in Austin, and it only took one homeless person or one person very upset to ruin the peace very quickly.
You bet.
Uh,
Yeah, there are. I've been in similar situations.
yeah, but I feel like also people are really good at defending the peace, but maybe defending it against someone, not always, but someone who has like a gun or just a homeless guy who's just very upset. But I guess when we come into like disagreement on like small social stuff, I think most time people just agree to disagree. You know?
My experience is that I get ignored.
Really?
Yeah. So, um, yeah, that's like the relationship can be sacrificed, uh, eh, because yeah, I might be a person who will yeah, I guess there's a conversation about homosexuality, for example, that I recall with a
Yeah.
person who you know I considered, and I'd like to still consider as a good friend. And I remember saying that I didn't want to take a position, and then the act of me not taking a position made me
Is it position?
the enemy,
Yeah.
right? Like I was wrong to not take a position on something.
Yeah.
And so that, and then that person has not responded to me in like maybe 2 years. So someone who I had at one point a very good relationship with. So
Yeah. It's hard to be positionless unless you're like laboring. You know, like if you're fixing something for somebody, nobody cares about your positions. But if you're in like dialogue, I don't know.
there, there's some things, there's actually quite a large number of things we can just ignore, and that would be fine, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know how important the issue of gay marriage as it's been framed. Like I don't know how important that issue is,
Mhm.
like pragmatically speaking, uh, and it's contextually dependent. It's like depends on who who are your friends, things like that.
Yeah.
And so if you are homosexual, then it's like, is it right for someone who is homosexual to just um, just cut off ties with people who won't take a position on the issue, right?
Right. Like not even just saying it's wrong, but just saying like I don't know is is also pretty bad.
Well, I mean, for me, it was the whole issue was gay marriage, right?
Yes.
It wasn't even a discussion about whether homosexuality was right or wrong. It was a discussion on whether or not uh, it was something like my perception of like there's some people who believe homosexual people should be able to get married. Period. If you disagree, you are evil, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'd like to try to, like, for example, in Alabama, we have a bunch of laws that I disagree with, but then at the same time, I appreciate the fact that, like, I actually value diversity, right? What if you have a state where homosexuality was treated different than in another state?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so yeah, it's complicated because people can compare. Like, there's that phrase, "wrong side of history," right?
Yeah.
So, but it's like maybe that phrase is confusing as well because it's like, is it wrong to allow people to kind of be conservative and
Mm.
allow other people to experiment with new things so they can sit back and watch and be careful before saying, okay, we're going to put our foot in the water and start changing? Like, is it so wrong to be patient and slow to change? Like,
I
to
don't
me,
think
it seems like that would be, it's good to have people like that in your community, in your
right.
society.
Mm-hmm.
And so we change and progress slowly and slower than what some people want.
I think those people kind of get bullied to the fringes in those areas.
Those people,
Um,
which people get bullied?
I guess more progressive people kind of get bullied in bigger cities. I mean, in smaller towns, but
Right.
bigger cities, more conservative people get kind of bullied. But I
But
really,
there's a majority, right? There,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I really think that that's a secular way of saying the Holy Spirit is real in the way that they use it, because it's like the Holy Spirit was with, I don't know, the Allies in World War II, because look at the world has changed. And the Holy Spirit was not with the Axis. And I feel like, I mean, there's a lot of leftists that actually don't like that fallacy. Like one guy
We,
called it a fallacy.
will you try to say that one more time? I'm not getting it.
Sure. So I guess the what is it called? The wrong side of history
Okay.
is basically being outside of the Holy Spirit or being outside of God. Your actions aren't aligned with what God is, and the fruits of what you do are shown, and they're not working. But if you're on the right side of history, it doesn't mean everything works out for you, but it does mean that God is with you. It does mean that your ideology will continue on, or rather, it's the ideology that is right, that's always been right. If I understand the way people use that phrase.
Yeah, I think you're right. In like the perception of the people who use the phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
The yeah, I'd mentioned the laws of UX. So like our brains can only handle a certain amount of information,
Sure.
like, and so you could be, perhaps you can be on the right side of history when you say it is wrong to do chattel slavery, for
Mm.
example. Um, but then, like, if you were in that time period, there's a question of, well, what's the best way to get the culture to change, right?
Mm.
So just because you might be right about one thing doesn't mean that you've got it all figured out, right? That because you're so limited as a human to
Mm.
be able to process, you know, this, what is it, John Vervaeke, combinatorial, explosive amounts of information in the problem set,
Mm.
that there's no way you're going to be like 100% right on the right side of history, but
Sure.
maybe you're like aiming in the right direction.
Yeah. I think that it's more of like a path. But I think when you get to specific issues, I don't think it's this one or that one. It's more of I chose this way and it's working, or I chose this other way and it's not. I don't know. Like
Sure.
if you don't mind me talking a little bit, I remember um, it feels like in smaller cities, people that leave Christianity are um, it happens more often if they're like coming from very conservative parents. And so I live in a very conservative city, but they're not conservative in the right ways, in my opinion. A lot of them aren't. There's not a lot of Christians here, but they used to be. And when I lived in Austin, it seemed like everyone was like a degenerate, part of my language, and anti-Christian and all that stuff. But I worked in a print shop, and besides 3 people, maybe 4, everybody was a Christian. I mean, they were progressives. It was kind of cringy when they hated Trump, but they were all Christians, and it was really cool actually. And then I come back here. Some people like Trump, some people don't, but they're very conservative people. Financially, they don't like the big cities and all that stuff. And only one person is a Christian. Everybody else is like not. They don't trust the church, or they don't trust, like, they're spiritual but not religious. And I talk to just random girls. There's a few pluralist Christians, but for the most part, people are just not. And so I wonder, going back to the right side of history, or the last thing you're talking about, why do you think that is? Where it's like in some progressive areas, it seems like they're more, without data, there are more Christians who are progressive, who just go with the flow, but at least didn't challenge your faith that much. Or for rural areas, people that really butt heads with it, they end up going not Christian, or become like agnostic or something like that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. The yeah.
It's fascinating. I really don't know how to like answer it.
Well,
Something I kind of got smacked with. Uh,
well, I mean, I keep coming back to Ash conformity. Like I do think that humans, we have limitations. All of us have limitations, and then we even have like there's something like human nature,
yeah.
and uh, and so uh, we tend to be shaped by the people around us. We tend to kind of mold into the people we surround ourselves with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's happening subconsciously. There's I guess Rene Girard comes to mind,
Mm,
and we mimic. We do a bunch of mimicry. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot going on subconsciously that causes us to have our beliefs, um, and it's not like we're trying to be rational, and it's not like we're trying to know the real truth, like, or whatever that is.
mm,
Is we're largely, most human beings, and all human beings to some degree, are being shaped by those who we hang out with,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like right now, there's things you can say that could get this channel, for example, banned, or should get
Right.
strikes against it. Right there's limits on our speech, and then I would say there's even limits on uh, what we think,
Mm,
because of what we get exposed to.
right.
Right. I mean, there's a bunch of like invisible forces at work. It's kind of like, I mean, people have been talking about egregores.
Yeah.
This, before that, I mean, I'd call them spirits, right? Or like a holy spirit, or there can be there's this spirit of contention that I've heard the LDS folks, the Mormon folks, talk about. Like, there's something in us where there's a reason this friend stopped wanting to talk to me, right? We want to avoid the contention.
Mm. Well, then Mhm. I would like to know how to survive the contention, and what do you think about aggregores and spirits and stuff? Those are two different questions, but
Yeah. So it's good doing this. In my experience, whenever I'm having contention, like I was doing direct messages with Jacob,
yeah,
and when it's text only, I don't know Jacob's tone, I don't know his facial expression. So if you're going to do uh, the disagreeing,
yeah,
right? If we're going to disagree with each other, it would be good to hear the tone of the voice. It would be good to like just getting the right environment that
yeah,
is conducive for disagreeing. I think that's really important.
yeah,
There's a lot of other things though. Like as an individual, we can practice. Um, I would say, like for me, the way I would describe it is practice meditating, or practice being able to remove the idea that I'm right. Like I've had the experience, for example, that I spent like 2 years of my life thinking I was right about like a perpetual motion machine, and
mm,
being proud, being arrogant, telling the dean of engineering at Auburn University, talking to all kinds of people. And it wasn't until I was able to stop myself and say, okay, nobody else is going to help me prove that I'm wrong. So let's imagine I'm wrong. Uh, how can I go about proving that I'm wrong? Nobody else is going to put in the work, right? So being able to actually put yourself in a position where you sincerely consider that you might be wrong, that's a hard move that we could work on as individuals.
yeah,
But there's actually beliefs that are going to cause you to uh, question that. Like I remember some Baptists teaching, that basically it seemed like I was discouraged from doubting, and I was encouraged to have something like a faith, and
yeah,
that if you are doubting, that you would, you can't be saved if you are doubting. For example, you won't go to heaven if you doubt. That was kind of the impression I received.
yeah.
But so that's a really powerful force to just get people to fear doubt, right?
I think there's a powerful force there, but I think I was texting this other girl who's agnostic, left faith, and she was talking about how she doesn't like to talk about religion with people because she's worried that they'll lose their faith. But for me, I feel like the more you do that, if you doubt it, you're not truly saved. I feel like that's a recipe for disaster. You're gonna collide with somebody, and you're gonna not know how to handle the pressure, and then you're like, oh well, I guess they're right. I mean, I think Matt Dillahunty is like the excellent. I don't know how conservative his background was, but he talked about how he was a Christian, went to the military, felt like God punished him for losing his job at Dell, and then tried to convert his atheist roommate. And I guess coming from the warning side of like you're gonna go to hell if you don't go to be saved, rather than really falling in love with Christ, or just even reading the scriptures alone. Those people get obliterated in like conversation, and they just become atheists because they feel like pardon me for over talking, but
No.
they feel like they're being liberated from a very stressful lie. And if you tell people that if you doubt you're going to hell, then they'll really like the opinion that there is no hell or something like this.
So like if you so the next move, if you
Mhm.
become an atheist, is to then see um, that you basically are rejecting an idea of God that was given to you,
Right.
right? Or an idea like basically, I mean, the Holy Scriptures, whatever they are to you,
Yeah.
they are ideas being attempting to be given to you by someone else, and you are interpreting them. And so, like, a lot of times I think the atheist is just rejecting an idea of God that was in their mind. Maybe they haven't even considered Spinoza's God, for example, or some kind of deist God or a pantheist God. So there's all these different ideas of what God is. And so an atheist really has, well, when I felt like an atheist, it was more like there's this man in the sky, and I don't believe that. Therefore, and I'm an atheist or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what other people who would call themselves atheists. Maybe that's why they believe what they believe. They'd actually still have. They need, like, it's the same move. Okay, the same move is to really doubt what you believe, right? So the reason they can't encounter God is because they believe that God, or the way it was for me, the reason I could not encounter God is because I believed God was some man in the sky that was doing these things like the flood.
Yeah.
And so everything I've been told about what God did, I had an idea of what it was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I said, well, let's imagine God is real, and I can actually have an encounter with God, and then let's just try that out for a while, right? And maybe I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to stop believing in God in the sky. And so that was my move into, and that's, to me, that's a move toward real agnosticism, right? The I don't know, like, you have to go into the I don't know.
Yeah.
If you want to change, whether you're an atheist who's rejecting, the man in the sky or the spaghetti monster or whatever, or whether you're whatever religion, or whatever your interpretation of the religion, like, to actually wrestle with God, I think you have to make this kind of agnostic move to say, well, I don't know, and I'm seeking, I think this is an important thing that Chad the alcoholic often points out is the importance of seeking, right?
Yeah.
And so, for seeking, you have to actually, you actually have to go to that position. I might not know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Jesus says, "Seek and you shall find." So.
What's that?
Jesus says, "Seek and you shall find."
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing is, like, if you were to take the Bible and all the truths in the Bible and whoever's Bible, just put them off to the side, and if God is real and you seek, you should end up finding the truth, and then you can come back and start looking at Scripture, and you can say, yeah, these are things that God taught me, right? So if God is real and you can have a relationship with God, you should be able to learn the things that, and maybe it's not everyone, but, like, if you're like a high IQ person that's very intelligent, and you have that determination and that grit, and you don't give up, right? You should be able to do that, right? And maybe that's not everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I mean, there are a lot of agnostic people, and I think they like spirituality, but they don't either like Christianity or like the church. I don't know if they're the high IQ type, but I do have a friend who's like specifically an atheist, and I feel like that'd actually be very appealing to him.
What's that? Say that one more time.
I'm sorry. I have a friend who's an atheist, and he's kind of a high IQ type.
Right.
And so I feel like that kind of just idea of just wrestling with God, or the concept of God, I'm sure he would come up with at least agnosticism.
Yeah, I think that's a move in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then if you're, like, really smart, it can actually be it can be a valid reason for your own arrogance, which prevents you from gaining that humility or that agnostic move in order to repent and do the at-one-ment, right? So it's actually a double-edged sword, being intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, I like high IQ people.
Right. You can have so much success that you think too highly of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's dangerous.
So may I ask, what is your beliefs on things? Are you Christian or agnostic?
So, I mean, I was definitely an agnostic, and then I feel like I've experienced enough things to know that God is real.
Okay.
and then but I don't. I'm suspicious that the creators of holy books um, didn't necessarily
Fudge things.
have the best intentions. And then so I'm suspicious of that. And, but, uh, but yeah, so like I'm suspicious of holy books. And even if even if they were
Yeah.
holy people who created the holy books, I would be suspicious of the interpretations and like that telephone game of interpretations
Yeah.
changing over time
Yeah.
and the language changing over time so that the meaning of a word has changed, right? So I'm suspicious of all of that. And those are reasons why prefer I'd prefer to just have,
Yeah.
to meet God or meet, and actually learn directly from God
Yeah.
and avoid the middleman.
Mhm.
So that's, yeah, that's kind of what I am. But I mean, I did like, I baptized myself and I said, I'm cool with Jesus helping me out. Like if Jesus is there and Jesus can help me out, then it's like, I'm cool with that. Because at one point in my past, I said, I don't want Jesus to help me. I think I was very arrogant.
Yeah.
I said, I don't need Jesus. I could do this. But then later on in life, I changed into a person who knows that cooperation and working as a team is really important. And if Jesus is there and can help me, then that would be cool.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I invited Jesus to help me.
How's that
And
going?
how's that going? Well, I met a guy who said the same day that happened, I met a guy who's a strange character. He said that he had been around since the time of Noah,
Wow.
and he had a gun on his hip, and he
Mhm.
seemed. And my mother-in-law thought he was a kind of a chauvinist. He was basically talking about how the river is dangerous and that you have to be careful, and there's women and children. The women and children need to be especially careful. Uh, which all that's true, but that could be interpreted that someone who is a kind of a feminist mindset might think that he's talking down to women and children, right?
Yeah.
But he was a little spooky because he had that gun on his hip. He was a
He sounds like a spooky guy. I mean, I claimed I was of the time of Moses.
Yeah, that's strange. Why would you say that?
Yeah, that's strange. And then right after, you said that you only want to trust God. I thought for me, it kind of felt like you were just going to do trust dialogue, like is our understandings and stuff. And then, like right when you said I'm going to only do that, you come up with a strange character who's like, from the time of Moses. And you're like, maybe I need a holy book, or maybe not. I think.
Well, he didn't. He said Noah. He didn't say Moses. So he was before Moses.
Oh, he's Noah.
Yeah, Noah.
So
He,
he's
he was before the flood.
yeah.
He was there. He'd been here since before the flood.
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just listen, because there's a homeless guy who was talking about how, I mean, sometimes they're cool, and sometimes they're very passionate about like concepts of God that are very impressive, and then sometimes they believe that they're actually lights powering the sky, and you're like, oh, cool. Well, I gotta
Yeah.
go back to doing laundry. So.
There's some lights powering the sky.
Yeah, like a Truman Show kind of thing.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's a documentary.
Yeah. I mean, I try to keep the number of things that I like accept to a minimum. I try to, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I definitely like even the question of what is God? Like I was talking about that when I was by myself is uh, like I know, like I like to believe that God is omniscient and
Yeah.
omnipresent and wants what's best for us,
Right.
and wants to help us. And like I believe all that. And then there's a question when people say God is omnipotent, that's when it gets fuzzy for me because like what does that mean? And that's the one thing. That's the one characteristic of God that I'm like skeptical about how powerful God is. Um, but I try to make that agnostic move. A lot of these things I try to make the agnostic move. The reason I'm skeptical is because I can see the risk. So if you believe God is omnipotent,
Hmm.
There's a risk of uh, of not participating and feeling like you don't have, like, yeah, that's the risk in my mind, is that you won't participate, and then perhaps your participation is actually vital, right?
Yeah.
And I hate to say like you or me as individuals, but us as a species, our participation may be vital and essential, and it would be a bad thing for us to
Feel like we don't
uh,
have the.
yeah. It's a big, I've seen people who call themselves Christians take that move
Yeah.
to basically shirk the responsibility. And so I don't, so any belief that's going to cause me to uh, not be responsible,
Yeah.
that's one of the, I'm going to be a little skeptical of that one.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point. Do you think it's more like a semicolon? When I read the Bible, sometimes you can find things that are conflicting with each other. But if I think of yes and, it helps a lot. So God is omniscient. I can't even say that word. God is in control of everything. Yes, and you are invited to, and it's vital for you to take part. Something like that. It is that because
Yeah.
it. I,
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, so there's the miracles, like raising people from the dead.
Hmm.
Um, so anytime there's a miracle, I would love for there to be miracles, but I have not experienced them yet.
Yeah.
So, and I'm trying to have an encounter with God, and I've had encounters with God, but I have not experienced. And I've even tried. I've prayed to God to bring someone back from the dead, um, and it's so yeah. The question in my mind would be: is can God bring people back from the dead
Mm-hmm.
without us? So, like, I even imagine that maybe God can, but would end up, essentially coaching us into how we can help bring people back from the dead, right? It's like I don't even know if God could bring people back from the dead or not. Now, if God brought someone back from the dead, it's a possibility that, like, I haven't tuned my instrument, like I haven't uh, been sanctified over time, and I can't bring people back from the dead. Like, that might be the case, and maybe there's no one on earth who can, or maybe the people who can haven't tried, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are questions in my mind. Uh, but whenever Crick, is it Watson and Crick, discovered the double helix of the DNA, it's like if you receive that in a dream, it's like I can see how God can give people dreams, which then drive uh, technology, and drive knowledge, the discovery of knowledge, right? Like that, the changes in society, I think, are definitely influenced by God through the power of dreams and visions and ideas that come out of nowhere that we
Yeah.
can't yet see. Like, I can see God doing that for sure.
Mm. Yeah.
But there's a guy named Steven. He liked to camp outdoors. Like, he would go camping in like all kinds of different places, like, and like even in cities and stuff. And then his wife died recently,
Yeah.
and it's like I felt so bad for him, but I was like, I'm gonna pray that she comes back. Like, I'm gonna pray that she'll come back, but she didn't come back.
Yeah.
So, but even right now, it's a prayer that she'll come back. Like, if she just came back right now, that would mean something, right? In
Yeah.
my mind, that would be the evidence of the kind of power that God has.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit like a, I like to rely on evidence.
I don't know if you'll get that, but I know
Yeah.
you continue to pray for that, you know,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
because I mean, I think that's like a pipeline to atheism. Just because, I mean, I remember my brother said something who's kind of high IQ, not, I wouldn't say similar to your story, but was really on fire for God in college or high school. Um, didn't even go to college, and then did missionary stuff, and then you know became very. He went 180 basically, and then so he's kind of very frustrated and kind of atheist, maybe agnostic. I don't know.
Well, when terrible things happen in life,
Yeah,
it's a to me, it's easier for me to believe in omniscient, like God knows everything past, present, and future, and God is everywhere. Like those are connected. And then to say, well, the my nephew who died when he was 11 months old because he had trisomy 21 and a heart issue.
yeah.
Um, that I don't I don't feel like if you believe God is omnipotent, you might believe that was part of God's plan, and then God is responsible to some degree.
Yeah.
But if you believe that we are here as like to embody God in this realm,
Mhm.
then you can say, well, God didn't have anything to do with that, right?
Oh, interesting.
So the human who was doing the surgery, so one of my prayers was that the doctors will do a good job. And so
Yeah.
then the doctor, whenever he burns my nephew, right, and causes an infection,
Oh,
it's like makes me tear up.
yeah. I'm sorry for.
But that happens. So if you believe God is omnipotent, and then tragedy happens because that's what happens in life,
Yeah.
I can see how that leads to atheism.
Hmm.
But then I would suggest my proposal is that if you believed this non-omnipotence and this partnership that God does with us as humans, then it I don't think it necessarily I don't for me that doesn't lead I don't think that leads me to atheism. And hopefully I'm communicating in a way where it doesn't lead people to atheism, right?
Yeah.
But it would just be it should probably be a rejection of what your idea of God was, right?
Mm.
It doesn't mean you have to reject God. It just means that your idea of God was not true, right? And
Right.
so you kind of have to reconceive. You have to do that wrestling. Anyways, like for me, the dream, like the power of dreams and visions and things like that, like I can always fall back on those experiences.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, I don't know about your friend who became an atheist. I don't know if what he thinks about where dreams come from and where visions and ideas come from.
yeah, that's a good point. He was more kind of like, well, God, if he's so powerful, why don't you turn me into s'mores? And then my friend who's a Christian said that's not how God works. And then he kind of chastised my friend. Um,
So
and
he had a conception of God that that probably isn't the true God, right? It was some kind
right,
of idol,
that's a good point.
right?
Um, maybe a lot of atheist people actually are pretty fundamental with their beliefs too. There's just they're fundamentally there is nothing. Um, and I think the reason why people push back on the concept of God being not omnit every all knowing or all doing and stuff is because then I think they would say that then he isn't God because he can't do anything. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's an argument for like, why would you worship a God that is not all powerful?
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think my view
Still holds strong.
holds. Yeah. So um, yeah, I think it still holds. Like a God who is not all powerful, but is all knowing, that you can have a relationship with who is good, right? A good God who is all knowing, who you can have a relationship with, is uh, is going to help you do good, and maybe it even hurts, and maybe you you will suffer, and you'll experience bad things, but in the end, there will be good things that come out of that. That it's my it's kind of like a love for the good, and not just the good of me, but the good of all,
Yeah,
like that true love of the good of all, which can be the reason. And then yeah, so yeah, I don't look at the world as if things are bad and things are getting worse, but there's a lot of people who do.
Yeah.
I do think that we can participate in making the world better and better faster. But I also think that we, like, to go back to the kind of the beginning of this conversation, it's like, why do people believe the things they do? And I'd mentioned Ash conformity. There's something about who we expose ourselves to which shapes our perception. And so if you think that this world is a bad place, it might have something to do with the people you're giving your attention to. Right?
Yeah.
Like you might be ignoring what's in front of you that might be good and beautiful, and you might be focusing your attention on people or information provided by people that are feeding on your anxiety and fear and drama, or your human nature, which sees a tiger and thinks it's important, but maybe it's not a real tiger.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to fix those anxieties. I've been trying to read, the scriptures more often, and really have them in my head, but I'm not there yet, so I don't know how to answer most of the questions. I think anxiety is bad, you know. I think,
You think anxiety is bad?
yeah, I do. I think because we're kind of rife with it, or at least I am.
Yeah.
I think there might be, issues, mental illness, all that stuff that people like to talk about. But I think it could be that anxiety comes from trying to find an answer specifically and worried that your answer is going to, like, you're worried you're losing something and you're wanting to save it but don't know how. I feel like that's kind of anxiety. You know, you
Yeah.
get, go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's a yeah, I'm just reminded of experiences where what comes out of the experience is this thing that something about you died, right? And so you can have these experiences in life where the past you died, and
Yeah.
so there's something sad about losing the past you, like,
Yeah.
because as humans we actually we become attached, like
Yeah.
we and when we lose the things that we were attached to that were familiar to us, we can become sad about it. And then we can also have anxiety about the sadness we know which will come, right? When we lose the thing. So that's what comes to mind when you're talking about that kind of anxiety.
Exactly. I mean, you can think of it as like a girl in your life, but you can also think of it as like a belief system in your life, you know. Um,
We like comfort. We like to feel comfortable.
yeah. Yeah.
I think it's probably good practice to try to make ourselves uncomfortable and get familiar with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, true. Have you ever done that, or?
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I have social anxiety, and so I went trick or treating, and my wife knows that it did not look like I was enjoying myself. But it's like, well, I like to confront the things that I like to put myself in situations that are uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah.
So you, whatever gives you anxiety, you can. It's like, I think, Jordan Peterson talked about people who have really bad anxiety, just about going into like the store. They would recommend just maybe first drive into the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Maybe after some time you get out of the car and you walk to the door. Maybe then you look around, you turn around, and you go back home. So you can confront the thing that makes you uncomfortable, and you expose. It's like an exposure therapy,
Yeah.
and I think that's good. Like when people who want comfort and they don't do anything. I think I heard the guy on Free Solo. He climbed El Capitan.
Mm,
Alex Honnold.
mm.
It's a good documentary, but he mentions in one part the people who just they want to be comfortable. It's like
Yeah.
nobody talks about those people. They're the ones who just want to be comfortable. Uh, so there's something about, in order to learn and grow and repent and do the 1 month, there's going to be something that gets sacrificed. There's going to be some type of a pain and a suffering, and you can come out on the other end better and stronger and different. And having lost, past you will be gone in some regard.
Like everything is a constant baptism or something like that.
Yeah, it can't. Well, there's an opportunity to, when we confront the things that give us anxiety.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity for us to come out of it transformed.
Yeah, because it's like maybe once you're saved, you begin to see this way that you can never go back to. But after that, then you're constantly experience little versions of change in that direction. Yeah.
So I've got a meeting in 5 minutes, and I can mute myself and allow you to stay. I can also allow you to talk with anyone else who wants to join, or I can end the stream. And I don't have a strong opinion either way. I should probably be working here pretty soon so that I can get my hours in for the day.
Sure.
But I know there's probably. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed this talk.
Yeah.
I feel like you had mentioned you felt like you were talking too much. I feel like I talk too much as well. But hopefully it was, helpful.
Yeah, it was, man. It was. But yeah, I don't know exactly how, if Jacob wants to do it like a 24 hours thing.
At some point that would be, I think I agree with Jacob that would be cool if it happened, where you can, so I could be listening to the 24 hours thing while I'm doing my work. Well, depends on what kind of work. If you're painting a wall, and you've been painting your whole life, you can listen. If you're doing brain surgery, you probably shouldn't be listening.
Yeah, I guess another time, man. That sounds awesome. But I got little things to do too.
Yeah.
But yeah, are you on the Discord or can
Yeah, I'm on Jacob's Ladder. I'm on Broken Clock Discord. That's Grimgriz. I'm on Awakening for the Meaning Crisis, but most of my attention is on Jacob's and Grimgriz's Discord.
All right, cool. What's your username, and I'll go follow you or friend you?
I'm Gavin Palmer, and then in parentheses I have my website. But yeah, I interact a little bit there. I can't. Jacob's Discord has grown. It's hard. So as a Discord server grows, it's harder to pay attention.
Yeah.
Attention is the most valuable resource in the world. So, but if anyone, I have no problem with people, grabbing my attention with a reply or a mention or anything like that.
Yeah, sure.
And if it ever became a problem, I would just communicate that I don't have to change my policy. I'm not a popular person, so.
Wow. One day, man, I'm sure. If that's what you want.
I want to be friends with people who are popular. I don't want to be popular.
I guess it makes sense.
Well, popular people say things and maybe popular people make big mistakes, and maybe there's a way to be helpful, to say, here's the thing that seems like the biggest mistake. And maybe it's not even me, but maybe I help build a platform that allows for the most helpful signal, whether it's helping you accomplish your goal or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm a software engineer with a good bit of experience, so I'm interested in that. I'm interested in this sense-making, distributed cognition, competence hierarchy idea, because I think it's the thing that's most important, is trying to help humans have these relationships which allow us to produce the best fruit possible, the most good fruit possible.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So to me, this is all just a start for a potential path that leads in that direction.
Yeah.
And it might not even be me. It's the world is ripe for that pattern to emerge, right? So it's going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
All right. Well, I enjoyed it, Aaron from Texas.
Yeah.
I will, yeah. So
Alabama.
have a good one. Talk to you later.